morning to you. Today is Tuesday, January 20th, 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory boards. Yesterday, I talked about mobilization as a phase you can govern, not a phase you simply survive. And as a reminder, in the UK, mobilisation is a regulator-approved stage where a firm is granted authorization with restriction before it's fully operational. So today I want to tackle the thing that quietly breaks a lot of board decisions making in related builds, and particularly in regulated builds. That is the one gate condition. And when a launch depends on one hard requirement, everything else starts to get distorted: strategy, funding, story, and even the culture in the company. So to illustrate this case, I'm referring to a real case, by the way, of a company listed on the London Stock Exchange alternative investment market that I'm watching. It has repositioned as a financial service investment platform anchored by an applicant, a UK small and medium enterprise challenger bank progressing through the licensing journey. So the market disclosures say the bank has a license outcome that is subject to the raising of minimum £25 million in regulatory capital. That single line creates a board trap, because when you are behind the gate, every conversation turns into how quickly can we raise the £25 million? And yes, that matter is a gate. But if you let the gate become the only dashboard that you have in your board, you start losing control of everything else. So recap so far is a company that is gated because they need to raise £25 million to acquire the licensing, the banking licensing, and today they are working under what is called authorization with restrictions. Now, what are the three problems here that I quickly can address based on this example? Number one is the gate becomes your valuation. If the minimum £25 million capital requirement is a condition to full authorization, then the investors start pricing the whole story as funding or failure, regardless of operational progress. That dynamic is explicitly flagged in the disclosures around the bank's licensing being subject to the £25 million raise. And all this information is coming from the public domain, by the way, so you can search it by yourself. Number two, the breach becomes your governance risk. In this particular case, the listed vehicle funded the bank through prepayments intended to position the forthcoming fundraising, to position themselves. And the economics are contingent. For example, it disclosed a facility with an accompanying 25% fee payable on completion of the capital fundraising, plus warrants conditional on completion. That is a rational bridging engineer, but it also increases complexity, scrutiny, and the need for a clean board guardrails. And problem number three is mobilization timeframes are not elastic. So, and this is coming from the Bank of England's new bank startups unit that states that the mobilization should not take longer than 12 months, and that existing mobilization requires a variation of permission process with regulators' requirements evident that the mobilization conditions have been completed. So if the gate drifts, in other words, like put it this way, if the gate drifts, right, so your runway and your timetable collide, pretty much. Let me put it in other words. Imagine the gate risk is like getting the keys of a new site, right? You have a brand new site, and then finding out that the power grid connection dated controls. So the whole building, you can fit everything in there, but you cannot open the doors because it's the grid, the power grid connection date the controls to provide electricity. So what does a good board do here when they have these complexities? So they have a runway, they have conditions, they put themselves into a very prepayment schedules, etc., etc. So you do pretend the gate is smaller than it is. So you also do not let it become the only thing you manage. Yeah, probably that you manage the gate and the storage convertibility around it. So you have managed two things. Here's what I mean by convertibility. In mobilization, you are converting three things at once. Number one is a progress into regular confidence or regulatory confidence, by the way. Number two is progress into investors' confidence. And number three is investor confidence in capital. So if one of these conversions stalls, the £25 million turns from a milestone into a cliff edge. Well, it's a bit dramatic, but actually, pretty much actually, you're going in the opposite direction, if you may. So as a board advisor, what I would propose to consider in this case, number one is to build a gain map instead of a capital wish list. Put the gate on a page one by splitting into board controls these quarters. What will happen this quarter? So number one is investor readiness. Number two is governance readiness. And number three is evidence readiness. So with that little three things, you pretty much have a full map of what's going on as a gain map. And by the way, the Bank of England is explicit about what regulators expect through mobilizations, including governance, risk, and controls, and the evidence needed to exit restrictions. Suggestion number two is treat bridge funding like a regulated product, not a favor. If you are issuing prepayments and contingent economics document the rationale, the triggers, and the fairness lens, so in this case, prepayments were explicitly restructured as a position to participate in the bank's fundraising with fees and warrants contingent to completion. That is exactly why board discipline must be visible, not assumed. So you have to be visible on all these things. And suggestion number three, aligned mobilization narrative to what restrictions means. And the Financial Conduct Authority describes mobilization as authorization with a restriction after threshold conditions are met, because some areas still need further work. So the board story should be, we are authorized to build and prove under restriction while we complete the work to remove it. That is more credible investor narrative than we are nearly ready. Yeah, so nearly ready is like a lot of assumptions there that you want to eradicate from the market. So how you can make this practical? If your whole plan depends on a £25 million rise, your board pack should answer three blunt questions every month. Number one is, what has moved that makes a £25 million erase easier to raise? The second question is, what has moved that makes the regulator more likely to lift restrictions when the capital is in? And number three is, what has moved that reduces the chances you are forced into poor terms because the clock is beating? So you have a timeline. And this is where boards often sleep. They ask management for a capital plan. They don't ask for the evidence plan. So, and remember that evidence is the best defensible position that you can ever have. So progress becomes invisible and the market assumes nothing is happening until the check clears. So why does this monthly three-step approach matter? Is for three things: outcomes, differentiators, and risk reduction. In terms of outcomes, helps the board to turn a single gate, like the £25 million regulatory capital conditions, into a governed plan with a measurable monthly evidence. So the public disclosure show the gate exists and the bridging is being used to sustain progress towards the fundraising goal, right? So you have your outcomes there. In terms of differentiator, anchor your mobilization cadence to regulator expectations. So the Bank of England sets out what good looks like in mobilization, including ongoing oversight, the evidence needed for exit, and the reality that mobilization is time-bounded. That converts into a board scorecard and an investor narrative that travels. So people can digest that and say, okay, I understand what's going on. And how helps you to reduce your risk is stress test the bridge economics and perception risk. When fees and warrants only crystallize on completion of a fundraising, board needs clear guardrails and clean disclosure discipline to avoid the market reading reading complexity and weakness, or complexity as weakness. So the disclosed 25% fee, for example, and the conditional warrants are exactly the sort of structure that needs this treatment. So stress test the breach economics and perception risk, the perception risk. So one action you can take home today and is doable in less than 30 minutes, write a one-page gate map. So gate requirement, 3 evidence signals, and 3 investor readiness signals. And one stop or reset trigger if the timeline slips this month, right? So let's pause it here for today and reconvene tomorrow, because tomorrow I'll get into the next board trap, when a supporting acquisition turns into a regulatory change of control bottlenecks right before the launch. So if you are a UK listed board running a regulated mobilization with a single capital gate, message me GATE, the word GATE, GATE, and we'll set up a 30-minute call to understand your position and how an advisory board can review and pressure test your evidence plans, bridge discipline, and funding narrative. Have a great day.